Well, thank you, Richard, Professor Dawkins, for joining us. We're coming up to our anniversary for Counterweight. We've been going for a year now. We've been hearing from quite a few people in STEM fields, from scientists in academia, from doctors, particularly engineers and tech people, who are coming up again and again against the idea that science and STEM subjects more broadly are white, Western, imperialist and masculine ways of knowing. I, I wonder what you would say to that idea.
It nauseates me. Science is science. Science is truth. There are truths out there which science is the best method we have for discovering them. Women and men, people of different political persuasions, different backgrounds, all can use the scientific method, and if they do it right, they'll get the right answer. So it is absolute nonsense to say that there are separate ways of knowing. I got a quote here from Steve Pinker, whom I greatly admire, who says, among the claims of, quote, difference feminists are that women do not engage in abstract linear reasoning, that they do not treat ideas with skepticism or evaluate them through rigorous debate, that they do not argue from general moral principles and other insults. Those are indeed insults to women, and they disgust me.
I couldn't agree more. I deeply resent the idea that because I have a uterus, I cannot think in a scientific way, and I have some other kind of mythical, intuitive knowledge that is somehow superior. I think these ideas are quite clearly sexist, and more recently they've been more focused on imperialism and race, and the idea that Black people, that South Asian people have different ways of knowing about medicine, about the world, comes up over and over again. And this is infuriating when the NHS is so dependent on attracting doctors from India, when we are reliant on engineers from Pakistan. I wonder how they feel to arrive and be told, actually, this isn't your knowledge. You should have some nice little mythical, superstitious thing.
Exactly.
Is that not?
Yes. It's possible there are other ways. There may be Eastern ways of knowing other things, maybe moral questions, maybe questions of spiritual awareness and meditation and things. I have respect for that. But when it comes to science, when it comes to actual truth about reality, science is the study of reality, then it becomes nonsense. Then it is an insult to people of any race to be told this is not your kind of, your way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. Of course, you've spent most of your professional life dealing with science denialism from a different counter-enlightenment perspective, from religious opposition to scientific truths which inconveniently go against religious narratives. And how have you... well, I know how you have dealt with this. How would you advise us now dealing with this this different threat to people in universities, to doctors, trying to give the best medical practice? How can we support them, do you think, to get through?
It's true that in my career I've mostly had to deal with creationists, and in a way that's easier to deal with because they make some pretense of valuing the scientific method. I mean, they do it badly, but they try to offer what sound superficially like scientific arguments. Of course, they're very bad arguments. What's happening now in universities, especially in non-scientific departments, is that they don't even appeal to scientific argument. They despise scientific arguments. They don't like rationalism. They don't like empiricism. So that's actually harder to deal with. If you can't even rely upon your audience to value the methods of logic and reason and mathematics and statistics, then it's hard to know quite where to start. If we're being told that feelings are more important than evidence, then it's a whole new ball game. It's one that we've got to learn how to deal with.
I quite agree, and I agree with you as well that sometimes what we want to know is cultural, or it is feelings based. Sometimes as humans we care more about how someone is feeling than anything else, because we are a social species. But when it comes up against this idea that I think Linda Tahiwai Smith, an Indigenous scholar, said empirical research is the dirtiest word to Indigenous people, because empiricism somehow insults Indigenous knowledge. I think that she insults Indigenous knowledge. So we will continue to support the liberal empiricists among every race, both sexes, any sexualities, and try and find a way through this. But it's getting harder and harder for people to speak out. Would you have any advice for people who are feeling intimidated or silenced by this?
Yes, I think I'd first say, of course, we have to respect feelings. Feelings are immensely important because, as you say, we are a social species, so we mustn't deny feelings. They're enormously important in human relationships, but not in science. Now, you asked me for advice for people who are intimidated. There is no doubt that intimidation does happen. And I know some of my colleagues have been intimidated. I feel like even been intimidated myself. But we have to remember that these insane voices are not a majority. They're a minority. They're a small minority. Don't be seduced by the fact that they're very loud voices into thinking that they represent a majority of humanity. Thank goodness they don't. A majority of people in the academic world, thank goodness they don't. Certainly not in scientific departments anyway. So don't be intimidated by the sheer loudness of these raucous voices. I suppose the other advice would be get together with your colleagues, and especially with your organization, Counterweight, which is set up in order to provide exactly the kind of support that's needed. It reminds me a little bit of the Clergy Project, which is a project I've been involved in America for clergy people who've lost their faith, but still are priests or rabbis, whatever they are. And they need support. And we set up a website, well, where they go incognito, because they have to be incognito. They don't want to be outed, for support from their fellow clergy people who've lost their faith. It's nothing like as bad as that. But nevertheless, Counterweight is, I think, an important initiative, a necessary initiative, and more power to your elbow.
Thank you very much.